Welcome back to the wonderful world of electrochemistry, where we put the magical spin of molten salts on it. It's great to have you with us as we cover chronoamperometry. We'll start with the basics and theory. If you need a refresher on what different symbols in the equations mean, pause the video here or come back at any time. Chronoamperometry. Woo! What a mouthful. Let's break it down. Chrono means time, ampere is the unit of current, and ometry is indicating measurement. So if we do it backwards, it literally means the measurement of current with time. So with chronoamperometry, we're setting or controlling the potential and then measuring the current response with time. So you can see that here on the right with these plots. We are at one potential, and then at time 0, we're stepping up to a different potential. Then below we get this current response where it spikes up and then decays down. Now this occurs if we take a big enough potential step that we're in the mass transfer limited regime. And if that's the case, and diffusion is the only mode of mass transfer occurring, the Cottrell equation will apply, as shown over here. It's shown here for a reduction reaction, which you would use if your oxidized species is in solution, and it's written here for oxidation if your reduced species was dissolved in solution. All right, now that we know what chronoamperometry is, how can we tell if we are in a mass transfer limited regime and we can use the Cottrell equation? Well, we're going to have to repeat chronoamperometry at a few different potential steps to figure that out. And so let's say we have a reaction occurring. We do a simple cyclic voltammetry sweep to figure out where this reaction is occurring. And so here on the right, we have a cyclic voltammogram, and we have a peak that occurs, indicating that a reaction is occurring on our electrode. So at step 1, we're near the equilibrium. Step 2, we've now increased the potential where there's an appreciable amount of the reaction occurring. And steps 3 and 4, we're even further along. And so let's see what happens as we take steps to those 4 different places. So for step 1, you can see that we have this blue curve here on the left bottom plot. Step 2, it becomes even more negative, and then steps 3 and 4, they practically overlap. So what's going on there? Why has the current stopped becoming more and more negative as we've stepped further out to steps 3 and 4? Well, it's because we're in the mass transfer controlled area. Notice how in the Cottrell equation written here for reduction that there is no dependence on potential. It just changes with time. And that is because we're mass transfer limited. When we're mass transfer limited, it doesn't matter how hard we crank that potential, we can no longer increase the rate of reaction because we're just waiting for ions to come to the electrode out of solution. So this is how we can verify that we are at mass transfer control and that the Cottrell equation may apply. When we start seeing the current overlap at different potential steps, that is a positive indicator that the Cottrell equation could apply. So what does it mean when we use the Cottrell equation? Well, to understand that, we need to look at the assumptions, the governing equations, and the conditions applied to derive it. So here we have the Nernst-Planck equation. And if you need a refresher on that, go back and look at our lesson 4 videos. But for the Cottrell equation, we're assuming that diffusion is the only mode of mass transport. So we're essentially getting a Fick's law up here because we're going to say migration is negligible. We have plenty of supporting electrolyte, so our species I isn't carrying much of the flux via migration. And then we're saying that convection is negligible. So our solution is still stagnant. There's not much bulk fluid flow. So the primary means or the dominant means by which I is moving in solution is diffusion. We're going to use Faraday's law here to relate the flux to the current. So we're going to take NFA and times it by our flux. And then we're going to use Fick's second law here to figure out how the concentration changes with time and space. That way we're able to get this flux term in Fick's first law. For the initial condition, we're just going to assume that at time 0 and before, our concentration is just the same throughout, and it's at the bulk concentration for species I, which could represent your oxidized or reduced species. And then for our boundary conditions, after time 0, we're going to say that next to the electrode, at position 0, which is right next to the electrode, our concentration of species I is practically 0. We took a big enough potential step that the surface concentration immediately drops to practically 0. And then the second boundary condition is, as we get far away from the electrode, that we're still at our bulk concentration. Notice how, in deriving this, we don't even consider what our product is. We don't consider whether it's a soluble product that dissolves and diffuses back into the solution, or if it's an insoluble product which then plates out on our electrode or precipitates out of solution. So it doesn't matter what the product type is, the Cottrell equation doesn't take that into account. And so in addition to not accounting for convection and migration, the Cottrell equation doesn't account for nucleation and surface area growth if you are depositing an insoluble product on there. However, if nucleation and surface area growth are minor and may not be significant, then the Cottrell equation applies to both a soluble or insoluble product. We'll talk about how to figure that out in our following videos. Next, we'll be going over the concentration profiles for both a soluble product and an insoluble product to help you gain some intuition and a greater ability to interpret the chronoamperometry responses. So I hope you'll join me there.